Right. Okay, we'll kick off this BIM plenary session. And for those of you who are not familiar with BIM or have a sketchy view of it, you might be asking yourself, well, what is its place in this collaboration and procurement conference? And we in the AEC profession, architects, engineers, contractors, building operators, we work in an industry which is very much in domain silos. Our process is fractured, as we know, it's litigious and is prone to error, which leads to waste. So what BIM does is provide a collaborative platform for design and construction and building operation in a way that has not been possible before. And that's what makes this exciting. And here to explain this in more detail is our first speaker, who is Ralph Montague. And Ralph is managing partner at ArcDocs. He is the coordinator of the CETA BIM Group and chairman of the RIAI Practice Subcommittee on BIM. Ralph, with his business partner Pat Slattery in 2009, set up ArcDocs, which is Ireland's first dedicated BIM consultancy practice. And I know I've been on a parallel journey, I suppose, in one sense, with Ralph over the last 5 or 6 years in promoting the message of BIM. But Ralph has shouldered that journey of labour, I suppose, really, really well in terms of the message that he brings. And I'm delighted that he's here today to share this with us.
Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to speak to you this morning. So, Malik has introduced me. I suppose our company for the last 7 years has been working with people and businesses and project teams to enable and support the use of BIM on over 100 projects, through consultancy, production, support and training. So hopefully you can bring a bit of that background to the discussion. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes this morning talking about information, and specifically information about buildings or built infrastructure. So I suppose an important point in BIM is not just about physical buildings, but any built infrastructure, and how we produce and manage and exchange that information, and how that will support collaborative and working and partnering. Okay. I think we can all agree that information is really important. You can't do anything without information. You can't agree a contract without information. You can't build anything without information. You can't maintain and operate a building without information. You can't even transact in property without information. So, I just want to make that point that information, while the physical built infrastructure has value, the information itself has value as well, and is an asset and should really be considered and cared for. I think we can also all agree that the quality of information has a profound effect or impact on the performance or outcome, not only of the way the project teams collaborate and work, but also the physical end product. So if you have good information, things tend to go well, and if you have poor quality information, things tend to go not so well. So that's quite simple, I suppose. But that brings me to the question: is how do you define quality information? And in my mind, information should be something that people can use and reuse as it goes downstream. So it should be digital. And in the vast amounts of information that we produce on building projects, there should be an easy way to search through that information. It should be able to be queried, and it should be accessible to people. It should be accurate and up to date, and ultimately, you should get that information in a useful format and in a timely fashion. So, in principle, I don't think anyone in this room would disagree with what I've just said there. Okay. The problem is that building information, as we understand it in the industry today, is the exact opposite of what I've just said. It's not digital, so it's not searchable in that sort of format. It's very difficult to go and find information. It's very difficult to query information. It's highly unlikely that when you do find a piece of information in all of that, that it's going to be accurate or up to date, or even if it was, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't trust it, and in that sort of format. Okay, we're back. In that sort of static format, it's very difficult to maintain that information for the life of a building project. So very quickly, the information source, if you like, becomes out of date and loses its value. So, all that information that you've spent hundreds of thousands of euros producing as part of a building project becomes useless in the end. Okay? And I suppose that's the issue we're trying to deal with. Now, of course, in other areas of life, we don't sort of have this problem. So when you're going to book your next holiday, you don't go and spend your Saturday morning in a travel agent sort of paging through a printed copy of the flight schedule of every airline that's going to your destination. Most likely you'll go online, you'll enter your destination, you'll create a search, you'll get almost instantly the most accurate and latest information of every airline that goes to your destination. You'll get different travel agents' prices for that. You'll make a selection, you'll put in your card details, and you expect to get confirmation of that transaction almost immediately. Confirm that your seat is booked on that flight. And so this is just the way we live in other areas of life. And the important thing here is that this is easy. Anybody can do this. You don't need a degree in being a travel agent in order to book your flight. Behind all of that, there's a lot of complexity on how that transaction actually works and gets recorded. But for the use of it, it's very easy. Now, of course, in the construction industry, we live with a different sort of nightmare when it comes to information. We're talking about multiple documents, all individually produced, paper-based documents that have to be manually coordinated and checked. It's a very labor-intensive process. It's very time-consuming. There's a lot of embedded human error in all of that documentation and coordination errors. And that's just for the people producing it. What about the people using information in the construction industry? That set of information is difficult to understand for most people. It's confusing. It's difficult to access. It's difficult to query. It's difficult to test or check or analyze. It involves a lot of costly administration, and ultimately the coordination errors and human errors that are inherently embedded in all of that turn out to be delays, variations, rework, abortive work, cost overruns, disputes, litigation. And we talk about this, and this is just normal life. We just learn to live with this in the construction industry. But all of that stuff is waste. None of that stuff actually adds any value to the built infrastructure itself. So by definition, that's waste. And some organizations who measure these kind of things would say that over 30% of the cost of construction is waste. Now whether you believe that figure or not, that's really up to each individual. And I suppose I'm not saying that all waste can come down to poor quality information, but definitely at the very root of the problem is the quality of information and how we produce and manage information in the construction industry, and the source of a lot of the tensions that are caused in the adversarial relationships we have in the construction industry could be brought back to how information is exchanged and provided. So that's the kind of problem I suppose we want to try and address as we talk today about collaboration and partnering in procurement. I want to just kind of make the point, I suppose, that information is key to the way people are going to transact and interact. And it's in that context, really, that I want to explain, what BIM is. Okay, so and why it's important. So, building information modeling, or BIM, is a process where you virtually construct a building in software. You assemble a building from components or objects that represent their real-life counterpart. And the important thing is that every component in that environment is a placeholder or container of all the information about that component of the building. So that's the place where you would input and record what that component is. And it's in a digital format that can be searched, queried, analyzed, etc. Now the immediate benefit, obviously, is you have this three-dimensional virtual model that people can begin to go into, walk around, look around, interact. Does this sound like collaboration? And sort of see whether everything's going to work, see if this is what you actually wanted in the first place. Before you even sign a contract, before you even put one shovel in the ground, in this virtual environment you can test and make sure that this is what everybody wants. So you can still get the traditional outputs from a BIM process. So if you need a set of drawings or you need a schedule of components, etc., these can be produced, but the very important point here is that these aren't drawings that are manually drafted by people. These aren't schedules that are manually typed. These are outputs that are it's information that's extracted from the information model in a format that suits whatever you need. And the important thing is that you're putting the information in once into the information model, and if you need to make a change, you make the change once, and every output is automatically updated. Okay, so it's a far, if compared to the way we normally do things, it's a far more efficient way of producing information. It's a far more efficient way of managing information. And if you want to test iterations or design options, etc., that's much easier to do because you can go and test it in the one environment and then recreate all the outputs. Now I do want to make the point, or stress the point really, that BIM is not something that you can just tack on to a traditional process. You don't sort of carry on with the traditional process, which really involves where your intellectual and productive input going into the production of lots of documents, and do BIM. It's an alternative approach. In BIM, your intellectual and productive input goes into the construction of this virtual building. Yes, you can derive documents from it if you like, but it's a different focus of where your effort and your time is spent. The one is a very time-consuming, labor-intensive process. The other is more efficient way of working. And the reason I'm stressing this point is because what we've seen in the last 7 years, working with a lot of project teams, is what I call pseudo-BIM. That's where a client has said, I'd like BIM on the project, please, and the team says, oh, of course, you can have that. And off they go, and they continue to design and produce information in the traditional way. So they produce lots of 2D drawings and schedules, etc. And in the corner of the office somewhere, there's some guy frantically trying to convert everything back to a BIM model. Okay? Now, yes, okay, you've got your BIM model and you've got your outputs, that's fine. It sounds fine, except that the outputs were not derived from the model. So they still have the same coordination errors, the same problems, and if you need to change something, you still got to go and update 100 drawings and whatever number of schedules, etc. So, just beware, I suppose, of pseudo-BIM, because I can tell you from experience that there's a lot more of that going on than you would imagine. Okay? You would think that the ideal situation with BIM is that everybody just begins to interact in this one environment, so that you might have one model that represents one building. Now, unfortunately, the way our contracts are written and our insurance products are written at the moment, you can't do that. We're still required to keep information separate for each discipline, for each supplier. So BIM Level 2, as it's described, is the current practice, where you have individual models for the different disciplines or suppliers, but you can bring those models together in what's called the federated model. And it's in that environment where you can see everything together, and you can test and you can look around and make sure that everything works. In fact, the software will even go and test where the elements of the building are clashing. So you can do a lot of coordination in this virtual environment and not have to do it on site where it's really expensive. Okay? Now that you have this virtual model, you can do stuff you could never do before. You could link every object in the model to your construction program and run through a visual simulation of the construction of the building in the virtual environment, look at issues of logistics, health and safety, etc. That's called 4D BIM, where you're adding the dimension of time. You can link every object to a cost database and let computers do what computers do really well, which is count stuff quickly and accurately. Okay, but that means you need people who can work with this information in that sort of way for better cost control. And that's called 5D BIM. The relevance of these terms will come up later. Since you have this virtual building, you can link it to real-time geographical data or weather data, and you can do sophisticated analysis on the buildings, on their performance, whether it's structural performance, whether it's energy performance, etc. And the point of all this analysis is to test the virtual building to see how the real building is going to perform. Going back to John's point, about beginning with the end in mind. It's fine building a building, but how's this building going to operate for the next 50 years? So let's test it before we build it. It's no good building the building and then testing it. Okay. So that's 6D BIM, and ultimately through this digital process, you're basically gathering and assembling all the information that people will need to effectively maintain and operate these facilities for the next 50 years in a digital, useful, accessible, accurate format, which is quality data. So that's called 7D BIM. I think if we're going to start talking about collaboration and partnering, we've got to start from the point of what it is that clients want. And I can tell you just basically what clients want to know is, what are we going to get? What's our building going to look like? Is it what we want? Is it going to suit our image? So they're really interested in scope. When are we going to get it? They're very interested in time. How's the whole delivery process going to work? Are you sure you're not going to kill anyone? Somebody mentioned killing 6 people earlier. Cost is obviously a very important issue. What's it going to cost, and how early can you tell me what it's going to cost so I can plan for that? There's no point telling me what it's going to cost after the final settlement, because that's a problem. Quality is a real issue. Like how durable is this building going to be? How long is it going to last? How much is it going to cost me to maintain and operate this facility? Value for money. In this age of accountability we live in, clients want to know that they are delivering value for their investors, if they're private clients, or for their public bodies, if they are public clients. And certainty is a big issue. That clients want to know that this is the cost, scope, everything is certain. They want their risks to be effectively managed. Most clients are not in the building business. They want it to be managed by the professional teams there. So you might think, well, what does BIM have to do with all this? Well, the 3D aspects of BIM, the fact that you have this virtual building that you can look around, walk around, gives everybody a much better understanding of the scope, of what it is they're getting. The 4D aspects of BIM gives everybody a much better of how the sequence, the logistics, etc. How is this going to be built? The 5D aspects of BIM obviously deal with cost control and quantity takeoff, having more accurate cost measures. The 6D aspects of BIM, the analysis, the structural analysis, energy analysis, all about quality. How do we produce better quality buildings? And the 7D aspects of BIM about delivering digital, accessible information, asset information at the end. It's also a quality issue, in my opinion. Rather than getting boxes full of paper at the end, you're getting digital data. So you can see that BIM touches on all the things that are important to clients. Now, I would say, as a client, if you're not asking your project teams for all those aspects of BIM, then you're not going to get the optimum result. And as a project team, if you're not delivering together all those different aspects of BIM, then you're not really addressing the key issues that are important to clients. So while there's lots of people doing nice 3D images and things, that's not enough anymore. Like, we have to do proper analysis. Because I can tell you from experience, clients don't want BIM. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for better project outcomes. And by better project outcomes, I mean they're looking for better buildings, built quicker and built cheaper. Now, everybody thinks instinctively you can't have that. You can't have all 3 of those things. Something has to give. If you want something better, you have to pay more for it, or you have to spend more time in it. But that sort of thinking is based on the incorrect assumption that you can't do anything about the process, that we can't improve the process, therefore it is what it is. But if you think about what I'm talking about, if we can cut out some of the waste and improve the processes, we can start turning waste back into quality and value. If you look at the targets that the UK government have set in their construction strategy, about delivering 50% better quality buildings, which is going to be measured on carbon, 50% quicker and 33% cheaper. Whether you agree with those targets or not, I suppose they're ambitious targets, but I can tell you this, if our counterparts in Europe and the UK are striving towards that, and our industry here is not, we are very quickly going to become uncompetitive and start losing work, not only in Europe, but start losing work in Ireland to other competitors. So I suppose the key message I want to put across today was, if you understand BIM, not just so much as a technology, but as a way of working, a process that produces better information, then you'll see that it supports all the principles of collaborative working, that you have this environment that people can collaborate, that can test, that they can analyze, they can process data very quickly. So my question, I suppose, to the discussion today is, can collaboration or partnering really work without better information? There's a catch, obviously. Just very quickly, sorry, Montague will finish off. There's a catch. The catch is everything I said is not going to happen. So it's not going to happen unless there's a clearly defined process put in place at the beginning of the project that requires everyone to work in a particular way. So we need a standard, and the brilliant thing for us in Ireland, since we're a little bit on the back foot here, is that all the hard work has been done. So if you look at the UK, Europe, internationally, all these standards and processes and procedures have already been written, they exist. We simply need to just pick them up and start using them. So in the words of that great 20th century philosopher, Nike, we just need to do it. Right? Just to make you aware, there's a lot happening in Europe, just in case you thought we were at the forefront of this in Ireland, and you can have a look at that. I suppose what's happening in Europe and internationally, you could look at it as an opportunity, or you could look at it as a threat. But we do need to do something about our skills, how we work, and become more innovative and productive. Lastly, if you're looking to understand more about BIM, I think your first port of call would be the Construction IT Alliance. It's a group set up over 12 years ago that's been promoting the use of IT in construction. It's a not-for-profit organisation that's well supported by many of the industry bodies in Ireland. They've been having a series of workshops for the last 5 years that are all recorded and available for people to get into. There's 9 regional groups around the country. There's an upcoming conference with some BIM Innovation Awards in November. There's also a research program sponsored by Enterprise Ireland, and part of that, interesting enough, the BIM Capability Program is setting up a group of people to look at procurement. So if anybody has a particular interest in procurement and BIM, you might contact CETA. They have established the National BIM Council with Enterprise Ireland, and more recently the National Standards Authority of Ireland have set up a merit committee to monitor what's happening in Europe. So with that, thanks very much.